Morning, 7:14 a.m. I was sitting at my desk when my phone buzzed. I looked down at the screen. Wire transfer confirmed, $170,000. I just stared at it for a while. Didn't move, didn't say anything. Just sat there in the quiet of the plant office with the hum of the floor coming up through the walls and looked at that number. 6 weeks earlier, a man I barely knew had tried to take $22,000 from me and told me it was a business decision. My name is Wade Kowalski. I'm 49 years old. For the past 11 years, I've been the plant operations manager at Hartwell Industrial in Dayton, Ohio. We make industrial equipment conveyor systems, loading mechanisms, the kind of heavy fabricated hardware that keeps warehouses and distribution centers running. About 500 employees. Mid-size, family-owned until recently. The kind of company where people stayed for decades. I know how every machine on that floor sounds when it's running right. I know when a bearing's about to go before the sensor catches it. And I know when something in a room is off, even if nobody's said a word yet. So before I tell you how it ended, let me take you back to where it started. It was a Thursday morning in late June. I got to the plant around 6:30, same as always. The parking lot was quiet. The guys on second shift were wrapping up, a few trucks idling near the side entrance. I badged in, walked past the floor, nodded to Cole Briggs, our floor supervisor, 20 years at Hartwell, knew every bolt in the building, and made it to my corner office. I set down my coffee and opened my laptop. There was a calendar invite sitting in my inbox, sent at 11:42 the night before. Subject line: Q2 performance review and compensation discussion. Time 10 a.m. Attendees: me, my direct manager Paige Donovan, and someone named Miles Sutton. I didn't know who Miles Sutton was. I pulled up the company directory. VP of Finance, 5 months at Hartwell. I reached into my chest pocket and took out the small notebook I carry everywhere. I wrote down his name and circled it. You don't get a calendar invite with a new VP of Finance attached to it. Sent at midnight with the words compensation discussion in the subject line, unless something is coming. But I also knew my numbers cold. Q2 had been strong, really strong. Production uptime at 97%. 3 of our biggest accounts had renewed early. Banner equipment out of Columbus. Riordan Supply up in Cleveland, and Coastal Fabricators down in Cincinnati. Those 3 together brought in about $4.2 million that quarter. My name was on every one of those relationships. Their ops managers had my cell number. When something went wrong on a Friday night, they didn't call the main line. They called me. I figured maybe they were announcing a restructure, maybe adding to my team, maybe something good. I told myself that and almost believed it. I was wrong. Let me back up a little further, because the background matters. I started at Hartwell in March of 2013. Before that, I'd spent 6 years at a machine parts manufacturer over in Canton. Good company, steady work, no drama. I had guys I'd worked next to for years. Then one Monday morning, they called everyone into the break room and told us the plant was closing in 30 days, just like that. No warning, nothing in writing anywhere. I'd trusted them the same way you trust a machine that's never let you down. I found out that morning that trust without documentation is worth exactly nothing when there's money involved. When I got to Hartwell, I did things differently. Every metric I hit, I documented. Every client call that mattered, I logged. Every deployment, every approval, every number that showed I was doing what I'd been hired to do, I kept a copy. Some guys on the floor thought I was paranoid. Maybe I was, but I'd learned. In early 2019, when there was a leadership transition and the CFO at the time, a man named Trent Moreau, 20+ years at the company, the kind of guy who shook your hand and meant it, I went to him with a proposal. I wanted a retention agreement. The logic was simple. If Hartwell ever got acquired, I needed to know I'd be compensated for staying through the transition. I knew the clients, I knew the systems, I knew where every operational body was buried. Losing me mid-merger would have cost Hartwell more than whatever they'd pay me to stay. Trent agreed. We negotiated the terms. The agreement was structured as 18 months of my base salary at $96,000 a year. That came to $144,000, which we rounded up slightly to $145,000, plus additional if certain client revenue thresholds held. He signed it, HR filed it. I took a copy home and put it in the filing cabinet where I keep tax returns and insurance documents. For 5 years, I didn't think about it. Hartwell was steady, growing, no drama. Then in early 2024, a new CEO came in, Nolan Hale. Ex-consultant, very polished, the kind of guy who could make a budget cut sound like a gift. A few months after Nolan Hale arrived, Miles Sutton showed up as VP of Finance, 38 years old, Harvard MBA. The kind of guy who used the phrase legacy cost structures when he meant people who'd been there too long and earned too much. The energy in the building shifted fast. Closed-door meetings I hadn't seen before. Talk about efficiency initiatives, and then around May, the rumors started moving through the floor. Merger talk. Nothing was confirmed publicly, but you could feel it the way you can feel a machine running hotter than it should before anyone checks the gauge. People were nervous. Conversations stopped when you walked into a room. Managers started carrying laptops to meetings they used to handle with a legal pad. I wasn't too worried. I had the retention agreement. Whatever was coming, I'd covered myself years ago. Then I closed a strong Q2. I hit every target and documented all of it. Uptime numbers, renewal confirmations, revenue figures, and submitted everything to Paige Donovan, my manager, for quarterly review. She approved it without comments. A few days later, I got an email from HR confirming my Q2 performance bonus, $32,000, to be processed with the next payroll cycle. I felt good about that. I'd earned it, and then I got the calendar invite. The meeting started right at 10. Small conference room on the second floor. No windows, just a table and 6 chairs and fluorescent light that made everyone look a little worse than they were. Paige was already there when I walked in, sitting on one side, hands folded on the table. Miles Sutton was across from her. Navy suit, blank expression. He didn't look up when I came in. I sat down. Paige gave me a tight smile. Thanks for coming, Wade. Miles finally looked up. He folded his hands the same way Paige had, like they'd rehearsed it. We're making some adjustments to Q2 bonus distributions. I took out my notebook and set it on the table. Open, pen ready. Due to strategic budget reallocation and preparation for upcoming organizational changes, executive leadership has decided to revise performance bonuses this cycle. I looked at Paige. She looked at the table. Revise how? I said. Miles slid a sheet of paper across to me. My name at the top. New amount, $10,000. I looked at it. Didn't pick it up. Just looked. This was already approved, I said. Provisionally approved. Miles's voice was flat, like he was reading from a manual. Final disbursements are subject to executive discretion. Executive discretion? I repeated. Correct. I hit every target. Paige jumped in. Your performance was excellent, Wade. That's not in question at all. Then what is in question? I asked. The company's in a transitional phase, she said. Leadership has decided to redirect some of the allocated bonus funds toward other strategic priorities. I looked at Miles. Where's the $22,000 going? That's not relevant to this discussion. I wrote the number down in my notebook. Then I wrote the date. I'd like to see the documentation for this decision, I said. The internal memo, the budget reallocation report, whatever justification you're using to walk back a payment that was already approved. Miles frowned slightly. That'll be provided in due course. I'm entitled to see the reasoning behind a retroactive compensation change. He stared at me for a moment. Then, we'll get you what we can. For now, this is the decision. I nodded slowly, and if I don't agree to it, Miles leaned back just slightly. Then we'd need to have a conversation about your future with the company. There it was. Quiet, no raised voice, just a threat dressed up as a sentence. I looked at Paige one more time. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I stood up, picked up the paper, folded it once, and walked out. I went back to my desk and sat there for a while. I didn't open my laptop. I didn't check email. I just sat with the paper in my hands and thought about the Canton plant in 2013 and the Monday morning in the break room and what I'd promised myself after that. Around noon, I drove home. Diane was in her home office working. I sat down at the kitchen table. She came out when she heard me close the door. One look at my face, and she pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. I told her everything. The meeting, the number, the threat at the end. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the only question that mattered. Do you still have the retention agreement? I was already standing up. I found it in the filing cabinet in the study, same place I'd put it in 2019. Behind the tax returns, paperclip to a copy of my original employment contract. I sat down at the desk and read every page. The main retention clause was right where I remembered it. 18 months of base salary upon a change of control, plus additional based on maintained client revenue thresholds. Trent Moreau's signature at the bottom, dated. Filed with HR, but then I kept reading. And about halfway through, I found the clause I'd forgotten about. It said that in the event the company attempted to reduce my compensation or terminate my employment without cause during the 12-month period preceding a change of control, the retention agreement would activate immediately. Not upon public announcement of the merger, not upon closing, immediately. The moment a documented compensation reduction occurred, I read it again, then a third time. I wrote the clause number in my notebook. They had done this to themselves. I didn't sign the revised bonus agreement. I didn't respond to Miles's email. Friday came and went, no follow-up call. No email from Paige. Nothing. Then Monday morning, HR sent a formal notice. Since I hadn't signed the revised terms, my Q2 bonus was being processed as 0 points, not $10,000, zero. The email said my non-response was interpreted as a declination of the adjusted offer. I forwarded it to my personal account. Then I replied to HR with one sentence. Please confirm this is an official reduction of my previously approved compensation. They confirmed it in under an hour. I saved that reply. Then I called Reed Haskell. Reed was a contract attorney I'd worked with years back on a supplier dispute. Straightforward guy, small office off Main Street, no framed diplomas on the wall, just a whiteboard and a coffee maker that was always going. I explained everything from the beginning. He listened without asking a single question until I was done. Send me the files tonight, he said. All of it. He called back the next morning before 8 Wade. This is clean. The moment they reduced your compensation, they triggered the clause. If they're in merger negotiations and it sounds like they are, you're entitled to the retention payout right now. The merger doesn't have to be announced. It doesn't have to be finalized. The trigger already happened. How much are we talking? $145,000 in retention plus the $32,000 bonus they pulled back, $177,000 total. Possibly more if your revenue numbers hold up under the agreement formula. I exhaled slowly and looked out the window at the backyard. They're going to fight it. Yes, Reed said. They are. But let me send them a letter first. Lay out your position, cite the clause, and give them a chance to respond before we file anything. Sometimes that's enough. He sent the letter that afternoon. The response came back within 24 hours. Not from Renee Caldwell, the outside counsel who'd already called me once to clarify the retention agreement. From Miles Sutton directly. The email was short. The company disputed the interpretation of the retention agreement. The bonus adjustment did not constitute a triggering event under the terms of the contract. And if I continued to pursue the matter, they would consider it a breach of my employment obligations and would take appropriate action. If I forwarded it to Reed without saying anything, he called me within the hour. That's a panic response, he said. If they were confident in their position, they'd hand it to Renee Caldwell and give you the standard legal runaround. Miles responding personally, in writing, within a day, that's not confidence. That's someone who knows they're exposed. So what do? We wait one more day. See if anyone above Miles walks it back. If they don't, we take the next step. Nobody walked it back. 2 days later, I was at the end of the shift, heading to my truck, when Cole Briggs fell into step beside me. He waited until we were well past the side entrance and into the far end of the parking lot before he said anything. He spoke quietly, eyes forward. The merger's real, he said. I heard it from someone on the floor who heard it from someone in accounting, Apex Fabrication out of Indianapolis. The deal's worth around $18 million, supposed to close by end of the month. I kept walking. There's more, Cole said. The deal has a continuity clause. Apex wants assurance that the key accounts stay stable through the transition. Apparently your name came up specifically. You're on the critical retention list. He paused. Miles has been going through all the legacy retention agreements, trying to renegotiate them before the close. He thinks they're overpriced. He's trying to clear them off the books before Apex's people review the liabilities. I stopped at my truck, so he's trying to cut my payout before the merger finalizes. That's how it looks. I stood there for a second. The evening was cooling down, smell of the plant still on my clothes. I thought about Trent Moreau sitting across from me in 2019 and shaking my hand after we signed. I thought about the Canton break room. I thought about my son starting his second year at Ohio State in the fall, and the conversation Diane and I'd had in the spring about not touching the college fund no matter what. Thanks, Cole, I said. He nodded and walked back toward the building without another word. That night, I called Reed again. If they fire me before the merger closes, I said, do I lose the retention claim? not automatically. Termination without cause during the 12-month window still triggers the clause. But they'll try to manufacture a reason, a performance issue, a policy violation, something that gives them cover. The problem is that fighting a wrongful termination on top of the retention claim gets messy and slow. Months. Maybe longer. So what's the leverage I have right now before they make a move? Reed was quiet for a moment. Is there anything they genuinely can't replace? Something operational that only you have access to or control over? I thought about it. Not the systems. Hartwell wasn't a software company. But I thought about the phone calls, the Friday night emergencies. The fact that when Banner Equipment's warehouse line went down on a holiday weekend 2 years ago, it was my personal cell that rang, and it was my crew that drove out there. I thought about how Dave at Riordan Supply had told me flat out at their last annual review dinner that if I ever left Hartwell, he'd have to take a serious look at the contract. Those 3 accounts, Banner, Riordan, Coastal Fabricators, made up over 60% of Hartwell's recurring revenue. The relationships lived in my phone and in years of 6 a.m. calls and knowing when to push back and when to just fix the problem. That didn't transfer in a folder. Apex Fabrication's acquisition team would figure that out fast if they hadn't already. Yeah, I said. I have something. I drafted a second letter with Reed. We spent 2 hours on it. The first half was straightforward, restated my position, cited the triggering event, requested the company honor the retention agreement. The second half was 1 paragraph, and it was the paragraph that mattered. It said that in the event the company attempted to terminate my employment or retaliate against me for asserting my contractual rights, I would be unable to provide the continuity support necessary for the ongoing client relationships I had personally developed and maintained over 11 years, specifically including the accounts that represented the majority of Hartwell's recurring revenue currently under review as part of the Apex Fabrication transition. I didn't threaten to sabotage anything. I didn't say I'd call the clients and tell them to walk. I just stated what was true. Those relationships existed because of me, and if I wasn't there, they were not guaranteed to stay. Read it over twice. This is going to get their attention. Send it, I said. The call came that same afternoon. I was back at my desk reviewing deployment schedules when my phone rang. Number I didn't recognize, I answered. Wade Kowalski, a smooth voice measured. This is Nolan Hale. I think we need to talk. I leaned back in my chair. I just received a letter from your attorney, Nolan Hale said. I'll be direct with you. I'm disappointed we've gotten here. Hartwell has always valued what you've built. I'd hoped we could resolve this without things getting complicated. I'd hoped that too, I said. But we're here. A pause. The Apex merger is critical to this company's future. We're talking about job security for 500 people. I need you to understand the stakes. I understand the stakes, I said. That's why I'm asking the company to honor an agreement that was signed 7 years ago. Another pause. Longer this time. What do you want, Wade? I didn't rush the answer. The retention payment, $145,000 under the terms of the agreement, plus the $32,000 bonus that was approved and then taken away, $177,000 point total. That's it. That's all I'm asking for. That's a significant amount. It's what I'm owed. Nolan Hale exhaled slowly. I'll need to speak with the board. I want you to know if this deal falls apart because of this situation, that's going to affect a lot of people. With respect, I said, that's on Miles Sutton. He's the one who decided to cut an approved bonus and then threatened me when I asked for documentation. I didn't create this situation. I'm responding to it. The line was quiet for a long moment. I'll call you back, Nolan Hale said, and he hung up. I didn't hear anything for the rest of that day or the next morning. I kept coming in, kept managing the floor, kept reviewing deployment schedules and answering emails like nothing was happening. The tension in the building was thick enough to notice. People moved differently around me, a little careful, a little wide, but nobody said anything directly. Then Friday afternoon, Reed called. They want to meet, he said. Tomorrow morning, Saturday, downtown at Renee Caldwell's office. He paused. Nolan Hale will be there. Miles Sutton, Renee, and 2 members of the board. That's a lot of people for a Saturday. It is, Reed said, which means they're serious about settling. The question is how serious. We arrived at 9 a.m. Renee Caldwell's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown, expensive furniture, a view of the river, the kind of place designed to make the other side feel outmatched before anyone said a word. Ride and I took the elevator up and were shown into a large conference room. Nolan Hale was already seated at the head of the table. He looked like he hadn't slept well. Miles Sutton sat to his right, jacket on, jaw tight, eyes moving to us as we walked in and then away. Renee Caldwell was across from him with a legal pad and a pen. At the far end sat two men I didn't recognize, both older, one in a dark suit, one in gray. Board members, they watched us sit down without expression. Nobody shook hands. Nolan Hale spoke first. "Wade, thank you for coming in on a Saturday. I want to start by saying that we genuinely value your contributions to Hartwell. My hope is that we can find something that works for everyone here." I nodded but didn't say anything. The board member in the dark suit leaned forward. "Mr. Kowalski, we've reviewed the retention agreement and consulted with our legal team. There's a legitimate question about whether the compensation adjustment constitutes a triggering event under the specific language of the contract." He folded his hands. "That said, we also recognize that litigation would be costly and disruptive, especially given the timing of the Apex transaction. So we'd like to propose a settlement." "Go ahead," Reed said. Renee Caldwell took over. "We're prepared to reinstate the original Q2 bonus, $32,000, and offer an additional discretionary payment of $55,000 as a gesture of goodwill. Total of $87,000. In exchange, Mr. Kowalski would waive any claims under the retention agreement and remain with the company through the merger close." Reed glanced at me. I kept my face neutral. "The retention agreement entitles him to $145,000, Reed said evenly. "On top of the $32,000 bonus, $87,000 isn't a serious number." Miles shifted in his chair. "The retention clause is subject to legal interpretation. We're offering a guaranteed payment to avoid a drawn-out dispute." "You triggered the clause yourself," Reed said, "in writing, confirmed by your own HR department." He set a copy of the HR confirmation email on the table. "There's not much to interpret." Miles started to respond. Nolan Hale put a hand up, and Miles stopped. The room went quiet. The board member in the gray suit looked at his colleague. Something passed between them, not words, just a look. Then he turned to Renee. "Can we have a few minutes?" Reed nodded. Of course. The five of them stood and filed out. The door clicked shut. Reed leaned close and spoke quietly. "They're going to come back with a real number. The board members haven't said anything that supports Miles's position. They're here to close this, not to fight it." We waited. It was probably 15 minutes, but it felt longer. I looked out the window at the river. I thought about the Canton break room in 2013. I thought about the filing cabinet at home and the paper-clipped copy of an agreement I'd signed on a handshake with a CFO who actually meant what he said. The door opened. Nolan Hale sat back down first. He looked tired in the way that people look when they've already made a decision they didn't want to make. "All right," he said. "Here's what we're prepared to do. Full retention payment, $145,000, plus the original bonus of $32,000. $17,700 total, wired to you within 3 business days of signing. In exchange, you remain with the company through the 90-day transition period following the merger close, provide full client continuity support, and sign a comprehensive release of further claims." Reed looked at me. "Up front," I said. "Not installments." Miles leaned forward. "That's not how we typically structure up front," Nolan Hale said, cutting him off without looking at him. "Fine." He looked at me. "Full amount within 3 business days." "Agreed?" "Agreed." The paperwork took the rest of the weekend. Renee's team drafted through Saturday night. Reed reviewed every page Sunday morning, made 3 small changes, and we signed Sunday afternoon in the same conference room with the riverview and the expensive furniture. I drove home and told Diane. We sat at the kitchen table for a while without saying much. Wednesday morning the wire came through. $177,000. I was at my desk at the plant when the notification hit my phone. I looked at it for a long time. Then I put the phone down, opened my notebook, and drew a clean line across the page. The merger closed 3 weeks later. The Apex transition went smoothly. I supported every account through the handoff. Banner, Reardon, Coastal, all of them. I made sure their ops teams had what they needed going into the new structure. I trained the incoming team and left documentation for everything. On my last day, I did my usual walk of the floor in the morning, checked the machines. Said goodbye to the guys I'd worked alongside for years. Cole Briggs found me near the loading bay around noon. He didn't say much, just shook my hand and held it for a second. "You did right," he said. I drove out of that parking lot on a Tuesday in November. My son was halfway through his 2nd year at Ohio State. No student loans. Diane and I had already blocked off 2 weeks in January, something we'd been saying we'd do for years and never had. Miles Sutton was gone within a month of the merger closing. Pushed out or left on his own, I heard both versions. He took a position at a startup that folded about a year later. As for me, I stayed the full 90 days, same as I'd agreed. After that, I gave my notice and walked away. I'd already started picking up consulting work, a few smaller manufacturers who needed someone to build out their operations processes from scratch. Turns out, when you've managed a plant floor for 11 years and kept 3 major accounts through 2 leadership changes and a merger, people want to talk to you. I'm doing well. Better than I expected. There's one thing I tell every client I work with now, right at the start, before we get into anything else. I tell them the same thing I learned the hard way twice, once in a break room in Canton, and once in a conference room with no windows on the second floor of a plant in Dayton. Get it in writing. Every agreement, every approval, every number that matters to you, document it and keep a copy somewhere they can't touch. Not because people are always crooked, but because when there's money on the table and pressure coming from above, even decent people make decisions they wouldn't otherwise make. And the only thing that holds when that happens is paper. Know what you've built, know who depends on it, and never let someone take what you earned just because they're counting on you to stay quiet. They counted on that with me. They were wrong. So, did I handle it right? Would you have done anything differently? Let me know in the comments. And if this kind of story is what you're here for, hit subscribe. There's more where this came from. The people who build the systems, manage the relationships, and keep everything running quietly. They're not invisible. They're just patient. And patience with paperwork is the most dangerous combination in any negotiation. Every machine has a load-bearing component that nobody thinks about until it's gone. In that company, I was that component. The difference is I knew it and I had it in writing.